Welcome to another broadcast of MindsYourHealthcast.com. Well, as you probably recall, if you were watching the last broadcast, that we had raised some interesting questions about perception and perspective and choice. And it's interesting because it all came about, me deciding to talk about this came about because of catching some commercials for drugs on TV. Now, it's interesting how people can watch the commercial and be influenced to go out and buy a drug that could cause immune failure, uncontrollable inflammation and destruction in your body, and cancer and death, so that your skin will look a little better. Now, not perfect, maybe 75% better after 3 months of this drug, but in the 3 months taking the drug, one could experience their demise. And yet somehow, and watching that, not notice any of the adverse stuff. Or maybe convince ourselves, well, it probably won't happen to me. It might happen to some people, but I'll be fine. And I noticed that a multitude of drugs are advertised, and then it's interesting the way it's staged. It is staged in such a way that at the beginning the problem is presented, and the person is distressed, disturbed, dismayed, sad, head down, no smile, and then they take the drug, and then the scene immediately goes to, wow, they're laughing, having a good time, the family's with them, they're out in the country, the cows are in the pasture, the sun's shining, the sky's blue, the grass is green, everything is great. But now while they're doing that, underneath it says taking this drug could cause blood clot, it could cause a heart attack, it could cause a stroke, it could cause death, but your nose won't run and your eyes won't water or burn. Now, it amazes me, and has for a good bit, what would move somebody to do that? To take a chance on something like that happening just to get rid of a runny nose. And interestingly, it didn't say that it's going to correct the problem. It's only going to manage the symptoms. Now, we've been, in my mind, programmed to accept all that. And the programming has to do with the perceptions and perspective that we have about the world. Now, we were looking in the dictionary on the difference. Perception is the process or act or faculty of perceiving, and the effect or product of perceiving is a perception. Now, this sounds straightforward enough. If you see it or hear it or feel it, experience it in some way, then you have gotten what's there. Well, that's not quite true, but that's the basic definition. Then under perspective is a view or vista. In other words, it's a view about something that you have arrived at. Now, we're going to review the whole process in a minute, but just wanting to remind you of what the dictionary has to say about the meaning. Now, then, of course, we run into something that I had brought up last week called the map and the territory. And the map and the territory is interesting because, if you have a map of the state of Florida, for example, that's not Florida. That is a map that somebody has drawn as a representation of Florida. And so when you look at the map, being unable, unless under the right conditions from an airplane high enough up, you can see the state in general. You're taking the word of the map drawer, that's what it is, and so this map becomes a representation of the state of Florida. But it's not the state of Florida, and could be inaccurate. In fact, if you go back and look at early maps of the U.S. or the world or whatever, you see that as time has gone on, and with putting satellites up and other things, we've been able to fine-tune that representation so that it is closer to what is actually there. But, you know, it's very difficult because when you start reading about perception and about reality, you find that it's hard for us to know what exactly is real. But now we can work on that and we can fine-tune it better because our perception has fed us information that allowed us to gain a perspective of the world. But that may not be true. But the problem is that when that happens, this perception, based on our perspective, has set up a group of filters. Now, there's an interesting little chart, and I don't know if you can see it or not, but you can see the colors. In this chart, in the center, is what is really there, reality, that which happened. The yellow zone around it is called your filters, your perceptions. And the filters are those things that control or regulate what our brain allows in through our senses. And out of that, we have a perceived reality. And what it says is, it does create a new reality. Your reaction is not reality. So the bottom line is, we perceive the world through a set of filters, and as we do that, we reach a conclusion, which is our perspective, our reality of the way the world is. And so when we see things, they go through these filters, and we may miss those things that we consider to be unimportant or don't fit what we want to happen. Now, that to me is the core of the matter, is what we really want to happen. And that's the filter that distorts and deletes and generalizes information coming into our conscious brain. In other words, we only see it as those filters allow us to see it. Now, we've illustrated that before, that if you have on rose-colored glasses and are not aware of it, you would swear the world is tinted toward the rose side. And if you had on violet or purple glasses, you would perceive the world as being purplish. In fact, you would have a hard time seeing white because most of the white would look purple or pink. And so those are the filters. Now, I mean, it's not hard to understand that when we illustrate that, but we have difficulty in understanding that within ourselves we have created a set of filters. And we're going to talk about that process in a minute. Oh, lots of paper. And the interesting thing is that even psychology has developed perspectives based on their observation or perceptions. And so I just pulled up one article that says that there are various approaches in contemporary psychology. And so this article is going to summarize 5 of the major psychological approaches, sometimes called perspectives, in psychology. So the fact is, even the psychologists can't agree on psychology, or even the perceptual part of psychology. So what do we do? Well, we have to be aware, number one, that they're there. Your opinion is your opinion. Your perception is your perception. Do not confuse them with facts or truths. A sign done by somebody named John Moore. And the one I showed last time, real simple. Most people see what they want to, at least what they expect to. And that was by Martha Grimes. And of course I mentioned about the 2 hands, and it's on the front of a book. This was done by Escher, and if you want some interesting views of the way perception can be altered right in front of your face, and you have a hard time sorting it out, get a book of Escher's drawings. But this is the one I always liked. It was called How Real is Real, and it shows two hands rising out of paper drawing the other hand. Each one is drawing the other hand. And the question is, how real is real, or which is real? And I had given you some others. And I thought, of course, the quote from C.S. Eliot was very good. Humankind cannot stand very much reality. If reality is perception, how do you feel the world perceives you? And, of course, the other one I thought was really cute. When everyone is thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking. And that's the one, I think, pretty much illustrates what we're talking about. Now, many years ago, a doctor, an MD out of Chicago area, by the name of Dr. Mendelson, M-A-N-D-E-L-S-S-O-N, I think it was 2 S's. Anyhow, the book is still available. It was called Confessions of a Medical Heretic, and he wrote some others, How to Raise a Healthy Child in Spite of Your Doctor, and Medical Malpractice, M-A-L-E, How Women Are Exploited by Medicine. And here's a guy from the inside talking about what's happened in medicine. And he gives some experiences he had when he was being trained in medicine and what he began to realize was happening in medicine. So he started trying to get people to open their eyes just to what medicine really was. He said it's a priesthood, and the doctors are the priests, the hospital is the cathedral, and the holy implements are the stethoscope and all the things that we connect with medicine, and of course the holy water is the potions we take. And he said that people put medicine into that position, and of course medicine was helping very heavily by trying to present the fact that they were gods. And so everybody bought into it and grew up with it. That became their perspective. So everything that medicine put out, they perceived to be a part of the perception that medicine was there to look out for them, to take care of them, to come up with the magic answer no matter what happened. And anything that they put out, you would trust, because after all, the perception is, and the perspectives, that they are there to help you. Now, originally that was true, but as time went on, and by the time Dr. Mendelson was writing in the 90s, 80s and 90s, it had already shifted and became the business of medicine. And so people's motives in many cases were different. And I'm not saying there's still not people going to medicine thinking they're going to help people after they've been in there a while. If they're paying attention, if they're still not deluded by their perspective and excuse away everything that happens, they get disgruntled and disillusioned, basically, and they look for other therapies. Example, the big growth of alternative medicine. Now, the interesting thing about this all is that people still operating out of this other perspective that the medical people are high priests, and the hospitals are the cathedrals where they carry out and ply their trade, blah, blah, blah. And so we still have not noticed a lot of things. Even though they're there, just like the ads, we don't notice them because this perspective says that these men are, and women, are priests, right next to God. And therefore, whatever they say and do is for our best interest, even if they cut off the wrong leg, even if they mess up on the surgery, even whatever it is. If you die from the drug they gave you, that's kind of to be expected. But I mean, in essence, their intent is good, and therefore I'm going to follow what they say, because they know what they're talking about, and they're speaking for God as the priests of God. And so that attitude. Now I'm exaggerating. I'm speaking in hyperbole a little to emphasize, but it's true that that's what has happened to medicine. I've watched it happen. I remember the old doctors. I remember the modern doctor. I remember how much training and how difficult it was to become a doctor in years past, and how now, as long as you get into a medical school, you'll pass, you'll get a license, and you'll be out working, no matter what your motive was. If it was to make a lot of money, to be in a big business, or whatever it is, who knows what all the drives and motivations are that make people get into medicine. All I know is that it's become very dangerous. The procedures they use, the drugs they use, all of those are extremely dangerous. When you have drugs that 50,000 people drop dead, or 150,000 people drop dead, we hear all that. I mean, it's presented to our ears, but somewhere between our ears and our cognitive part of the brain, it kind of gets lost and we kind of ignore it. I mean, there's no outcry if 150,000 people drop dead with a COX-2 inhibitor. Where's all the, I mean, if anything other than medicine killed 150,000 people, what would happen? There would be a terrible outcry. Something has to be done. But we take it in stride as though, well, you know, it's just like it somewhere disappears into a black hole when it comes in and doesn't trigger alarms that, wait a minute, something is wrong. We see the health bill go last year to about $2.7 trillion, and I keep asking the question, are we healthier? Of course not. Sicker than ever. That's why the bill's so high. And yet we tolerate it. And I have to laugh because I have watched so many cases where people have been sick and were getting nowhere. In fact, their treatment was making them worse, and in many cases actually damaged them. And somebody would say, well, why don't you go to something natural? Ooh. Well, I wonder if it's safe. Someone who's been damaged and injured for ages and is getting sicker and sicker with the things that they have been taking, which every month hundreds of drugs are pulled and hundreds of new ones are put in. Well, is it safe? Well, it's only been around several thousand years, but it might not be safe. Is it proven? Well, I guess if you find out that for 5,000 years it's been being used and a lot of people received benefit and nobody was poisoned with it, nobody died from it, well, I don't know. I don't know if I want to take that. I want to be sure that what I'm going to take is safe. But they aren't safe. What they're taking from the drug industry, every one of them, all you have to do is read the adverse effects and tell me whether you think that's safe. Is it effective? Well, even if it isn't effective, it's not going to kill you in the process. But the fact is, the history is there. Well, how much is it? Was $10 or $20 for 100 of these pills or capsules or whatever? Wow, $10, $20, that's a lot of money. But we get a prescription for an antibiotic, and if we don't have insurance, we pay $20 per pill, and it may have such terrible adverse effects that we may be end up hospitalized and or dead from it, but, well, you know, that's okay. You know, it's just like nothing clicking. So I have great trouble with that, and I have to laugh because the drug industry took over the FDA very few years after it got started. They ousted the man, Harvey, all of a sudden his name bounced right on my head, Harvey Wiley. And they ousted him because he was a doctor and a chemist, a biochemist, and he saw what was happening with the food and drug industry. And so he pressed to get an agency that could regulate that and keep a lot of the garbage that was being passed off to humans in their food and in the drugs. And it didn't take very many years to get him ousted, and from then on they owned the FDA. And so, consequently, the drug companies saw people taking herbs and a growing interest in herbs, and they became quite concerned about that because, everybody who takes an herb is taking money out of the pocket of the pharmaceutical and the medical doctor that prescribes it. And so they knew if that started to grow, it would be a problem. Well, it did grow because many people, not everyone, some people woke up out of their trance and changed their perception and changed their perspective and said, well, I'm going to take that stuff and pay that kind of money for that, and it's not even aimed at getting me well. And I've emphasized that over and over, and I'm not sure that it still is clicking. The drugs aren't designed to cure anything. They're designed to manage symptoms. Just read the research. I've looked in medical journals, The Lancet, New England Journal of Medicine, the Journal of the American Medical Association, and when you look at those, there's ads and studies in there, studies of drugs and ads to sell drugs. And it always says, for the management of the symptoms of blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's what the products are produced. Now, what is the advantage? Well, if you don't get rid of the problem, you can sell management of the problem forever. And so everybody will be on drugs for their whole life. I mean, this is where it's down to. And so it always amuses me when people throw out this, well, is it safe? Is it proven? Is it effective? Well, gee, you mean you want to charge me $20 for 100 of those? I only had to pay $20 a pill for my antibiotics. Sometimes I have to shake my head and think, what is going on? But then I realize, yep, we've been programmed that way. I remember in my early days, that's how I grew up. The doctors were the people. They had the secret. The secret was in them and in the cathedrals that they took you to, and all great things could happen. And I'm not saying people weren't helped, and especially people in accidents and emergencies, broken bones, bad cuts, and damage of various sorts. Medicine in the emergency realm developed very well, and surgery to make repairs and so forth, but not routine surgery to cut everything out that has a symptom. But surgery that was needed when there was a serious accident or sometimes even an inborn defect of some sort that could be corrected, then that was the proper use. But at any rate, I've seen so many cases. One of my patients came to me and they said, this friend of ours, very good friend, has cancer, and I'm wondering if there's anything that he could do in the natural realm. Now, this is several years ago. And so I said, well, there's the possibility. I mean, certainly couldn't guarantee anything, especially since finally medicine told him he had like 2 weeks to live. So they came in and said, he just was back from the doctor. They said he has 2 weeks to live. What do you think I should do? I said, well, you can suggest to him that he might consider some other alternatives, but it's kind of late down the road. Well, anyhow, they went to talk to him and his wife. And so they said, since medicine can no longer do anything, they've said this is it, there's nothing more we can do, you have 2 weeks left, why don't you consider natural medicine or alternative medicine? And he got this puzzled look on his face and said, natural medicine. Oh, yeah, that's that medicine where you have to change your diet. No, I wouldn't be interested in that. And 2 weeks later, he died. And this person was really shook up that somebody would be that near to death, had been told by medicine they couldn't be helped any further, and then would decline to look at something that might cause them to have to change their diet. Well, his diet's changed now. He doesn't eat any food at all. But I've noticed that happen a lot. Now, medicine, of course, perpetuated the fear, because after all, they're the priest. If the priest pronounces something, it must be right. And so regular medicine for years has said herbs are dangerous, there's no studies to prove their efficacy or their safety, don't take them. Guess what? many people, once they broke out of that paradigm and changed their thinking process and their perception and their perspective, they started taking herbs. And the herbal market grew because they resurrected all these books of hundreds of years of how these herbs had helped people in their work at restoring their health, not just managing symptoms, but at restoring their health. And so medicine, they're not, the pharmaceuticals aren't dumb. They're pretty smart people. And they saw, instead of people spending a few $1 million every year on natural things, now it's getting up to the billions. That's 1,000 million. And that's no longer pocket change. So where does that $1 billion come from that the people spend on that? It comes away from regular medicine. Now they know it's a problem. So how do you think they dealt with that problem? They said, well, if people are going to buy it anyhow, then we should sell it and make money on it also. So guess what? Out of the blue, here's an industry that argued herbs are unproven, unsafe, and could be dangerous, to putting out, same company that puts out the PDR for all the drugs, came out with a PDR called herbal medicine. And in that PDR, it's full of all of these sheets, or detail sheets of all these herbs showing the chemistry of it, the effectiveness of it, the toxicity of it, the whole bit. All the information is there. Now, for several years, medicine argued there were no studies. Now, all of a sudden, they have all these studies. Where did they come from? Well, they came from Germany because the Germans have studied it for 200 or 300 years, and they compiled all this information, did all the studies. The pharmaceuticals are in Germany. They knew that all along. But as long as they could convince people there were no studies and no information, they thought they could prejudice them against it and change your perspective by changing your perception. And so here they have herbal medicine, PDR. Now, interestingly, over the years, the FDA always said you cannot call an herb a medicine. You cannot use it as a medicine. It only can be used as a food supplement because it's unproven. And so no company could put out an herb and say this herb could help an upset stomach, for example, because it's unproven, unsafe, could be dangerous. All of a sudden, the pharmaceutical industry puts out this big PDR. It says herbal medicine, no problem. They didn't have to prove it because the studies were already done years and years and years before, and they lied all along, and the public accepted the lie and were afraid that it wasn't safe and it wasn't effective and it was unproven and all that. Perception. We were programmed that the doctors were the priests and the priests were the ones next to God, and they knew all the answers. So if they say it and you take their product and you die, well, that's routine. One person take an herb and die, what happens? Oh, national news. They might have been injured by this herb. They died, they'd been taking the herb, so it must have been the herb. Is that science? No, it's BS. It's propaganda. So, to me, it's just interesting how we get to that point that we can just shut out everything. But then as I got to thinking about it, I see how it comes about, and I kind of assembled some material, and we'll go over this pretty fast because I don't want to drag this out too long. Every one of us, when we're born into this world, we bring in a lot of stuff from our ancestors. Number one is there's the genetic influence, which by the 60s we had an idea of the chemical constituency of DNA and RNA. And so that sets certain things in play. epigenetics. Epigenetics is something new and not new. It's actually a restatement of the old homeopathic medicine idea of a miasm, which is an inherited taint. Not genetic, but inherited, passed down through the family, as though it's information that's imprinted and passed on. This information can affect the way genes express or don't express and do other things, but it is not genetic, and so they named it epigenetic instead of miasm, which meant an inherited taint. And so there's actually a lot of books out already on epigenetics and how they influence. So we all come in with that. We come in with the family genes, and we come in with the family epigenes, or epigenetics. The influences that will determine how those genes do or do not express. Good genes being inhibited, bad genes being expressed, or vice versa. And then the time that we spend in the uterus after conception, which has been referred to as the pre and perinatal influences, studied by a lot of people in the therapy field, and actually they have an organization of pre and perinatal influences and disturbances created by things that happen intrauterine. Now, we kind of ignore that today, but the fact is that's what's going on with the mother and father, and the environment and the diet of so forth of the mother can have a tremendous influence on the health and well-being of the fetus, and of course later the baby that is born into this world. And so, as I say, there's a whole organization that has done tremendous studies. If you get on Google, you can find it and get a lot of information on it. Okay, but here we have two things already setting the stage for us being what we are. Then we have the actual birth, and the child starts to develop. And it's during that first 3 years that even though physically the child is born, it's still psychologically, emotionally attached to the mother. And at around age 3, the baby starts to assert itself, or the infant, young child, however you want to refer to it, the young child begins to assert themselves as an independent person and separate from the mother psychologically, emotionally. That would be a psychological, emotional birth. And so a lot of studies have been done to indicate that first 3 years and the separation point at about age 3 become very significant in how we see the world and how we are able to deal with it emotionally and psychologically. And there's been some big studies on that. In particular, a doctor by the name he's a psychiatrist, of Clancy McKenzie, and I'll mention him again. He has some books out, one in particular called Delayed Post-Traumatic Stress Syndrome, or disease or disorder, however you want to refer to that, which says that first 3 years is when we can develop a post-traumatic stress issue that kind of subsides, but down the road later, other events in life kind of reinforce it and make it more powerful, until at some point in our life we could have a major or significant breakdown, especially schizophrenic. And he's done thousands, literally thousands of studies, and his material, I think, is extremely good. And so he says it's just finally that the post-traumatic stress is overburdened, the person can no longer deal with or tolerate it, and they ended up suffering a breakdown. Now, that emotional decision they make at that point is well illustrated in more common language in something called transactional analysis, was by Eric Berne. And Eric Berne was a psychiatrist who one day realized that sometimes we function out of different ego states, and then other days others, or sometimes several different times in the same day, and that it affects the way we transact with other people, and so he called it transactional analysis. But he says that this psychological birth issue is like an injunction on us, that depending on how the mother handles it, if she handles it good, then the person has a perception of being okay. If she doesn't handle it so good, then we have a perception of conditional love or conditional strokes, and it becomes more of a problem. If she totally rejects at that period, then we have a major injunction that you're not okay all the time, that there's something terrible wrong with you, and therefore that things that happen in that period of time, but that's one of them. The other would be your perceptions and relation to siblings and so forth during that first 3 years, all are part of that big issue. And so in transactional analysis, it's called an injunction, and you take a life position, I'm not okay, but everyone else seems to be okay, and that begins to affect you or create a perception of yourself that leads to your perspective on yourself and others. And so based on that perspective, you then have the perceptions of the world tainted by the filters. And so that just keeps going around the pattern. Perceptions, perspective, mind filters, more perceptions, more perspective. And so that's how we gain, in my mind, a view of the world that shuts out certain things and allows others to come in. Now, according to transactional analysis, that would be that you have written yourself a script for your life, and now you're starting to fulfill it. You're gathering together the right conditions, the right people, the right costumes, the right plot to write yourself a script for your life, and that becomes your perspective of the world, your general perspective, which includes all those filters that were inserted about certain things that you don't see or you would rather not see, but you're not doing it consciously necessarily. It's in the background. It just is automatic. So, medical doctors are priests, and therefore what they say comes from the authority of God, and so you listen to them. No matter what the consequences, they're right, and you must be wrong because they're the priest and you're not. You're only the peons. And so therefore it leads you to reject or decline other things that are not being perpetrated or produced or passed out by the priest, because you're not sure if you can trust that. And especially if the priest gives a negative pronunciation about it, then forget it. You know, we can't take that because the priest has already said it's no good. And so it just goes on and on and on, and that's what gets us where we are. Now, there are many therapies that have come about to help deal with that, like Clancy McKenzie has had some very good success with schizophrenia. As I said, worked with thousands of people and pretty well proven his concept or his original theory that this delayed post-traumatic stress is a huge problem with a lot of people. Now, not everyone, and not to that degree. Everyone doesn't feel that they're totally not okay and everybody else is totally okay. We have degrees of that. And the more profound the degree, the more it influences or controls or inhibits our life. If it's only partial, it just means in certain things we don't do so well, and that we feel that we're incompetent, incapable, and not okay about. But other things we feel okay, so that allows us to kind of function without being totally wiped out of the picture. Now, there's a lot of references that cover all this, and I think the best way is that if you really are interested, I could read them to you now, but if you're really interested, they come out of transactional analysis, and as they came out of Dr. McKenzie's stuff, The Genie and the Genes by Dawson Church, who's a PhD researcher on the epigenetics and so forth. Arthur Janoff, or Jonoff as some people say, developed something called the primal scream years ago that had to do with birth trauma and pre- and post-birth issues. And he's written several books, actually. If you go to Amazon or our site, if it's not on there, I think some of them are, but whether they're all on or not. But He even has one called Life Before Birth, the hidden script that rules our lives. And so he was very knowledgeable of the fact that things that happen while intrauterine can be very significant. But he also wrote this Primal Scream, and then the Primal Scream updated, he wrote a more updated book about it, how he realized how it affected the physical health as well as the emotional health. So very good material, and well, there's a lot of it, and what I can do is give you a list. If you really want it, you can email about it. I'm thinking about putting a special page on anyhow about this because I think it is so important, and kind of giving a brief synopsis and then listing all the resources that are very good. Now, we didn't mention NLP yet, but they're the ones especially that are big on the map is not the territory, and changing your perspective about everything, which is cognitive therapies. In fact, cognitive therapies do that. And there's some new energy medicine approaches that also do that, especially what they call now energy psychology. And there's different approaches to that. I work with some of those, in particular EVOX, E-V-O-X, which is a system, and it's explained as how perception reframing can improve your life. So you reframe, which means you change the way you perceive, and what it does is it really erases a lot of emotional energy, negative emotional energy, out of your psyche, and therefore frees up your mind to be able to function better, because I've had many people that were totally disabled emotionally and could not function from the time they were a child, and within 4 to 6 sessions with this, what it does is based on voice analysis, and when you talk, your brain is feeding words through the vocal cords and controlling the vocal cords, and therefore when you talk, you can record that, and there's a mathematical application called a fast Fourier transform analysis, which probably doesn't mean squat to you, but that breaks it down into all the individual frequencies, and each of those relate to certain emotional type issues, and if they're very powerful ones, then those are problems. And so it shows up on a graph with different colors. The stronger the emotional issue, the goes to red is the most powerful one, and so it's red, orange, yellow, green, and blue. And then white, which means pretty flat. And so it treats you back by treating you with sound patterns that eradicate those negative energies and emotions, so that you still can have the memory without all of the adverse effects. So that's one of the approaches. There's other approaches to it. Hypnotherapy many times is good. Something called the Emotional Freedom Technique, based on thought field therapy by Roger Callahan out of California, that has to do with tapping on certain acupoints as you're thinking about your issues, and it shifts the energy and therefore kind of helps you neutralize a lot of the stuff related to that. And with NLP, it has to do more with the cognitive thing, understanding how language affects neurology, therefore you change the language and you change the neurology. So there's approaches to it. You don't have to be stuck with it. But if you want to free yourself up, these are all ways you can do that. So don't forget, if you really want to get some freedom in your life and begin to see the world in a fuller way, I'm not saying you'll ever get to the point that you are totally free of all fillers and all prejudices, but you certainly can become aware of a lot of them and make your life much more pleasant, that you're not being bugged by all these fears and so forth, because many of those filters lead to fears. You fear that you're out of control and that you have no control in the world, no control of yourself or the world. And once you begin to realize that you can be free of a lot of that, and then it changes your ability to perceive more and therefore change your perspective. So I hope that, and of course make better choices. And so I hope that that is beneficial, what I've given you. It was just some wonderings I had, and I had to sit down and kind of go through what I knew about it and organize it a little bit so that I could present it to you. But I'm hoping it will be of great benefit to help you change your life to go the direction you would like to go. So we've come to the end of another broadcast. So I will sign off for mindyourhealthcast.com and advise you to be healthy.